Вітаю вас знову на Захід 21, практичній конференції по просуванню на західних ринках. З нами Джейсон сьогодні. Він розкаже про те, як працювати з knowledge графом, як аналізувати, що треба зробити, щоб попасти в Google в knowledge graph, і розкаже про алгоритми. Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. How are you today, Victor?
I'm good. I was just explaining you today, how in the morning, Russian sent a lot of missiles to Kiev and some other cities, so there's no electricity, but we're still live. So yeah, we kind of all right. Can you please tell me the main the key takeaway of your presentation today, shortly, in a short? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah, absolutely no problem at all. The key takeaways are really that there are three knowledge algorithms at Google that we can consider. And once you understand how those knowledge algorithms function, it becomes much, much easier to understand how we can actually work on Google in terms of knowledge. As you said, I'm the knowledge panel expert, and that obviously means ensuring that Google understands who we are, what we do, and who our audience is, so that it can present that factual information in knowledge panels. And the trick is to understand the knowledge algorithms. And there are three: the knowledge extraction algorithm, the knowledge graph, or the knowledge vault algorithm, and the knowledge panel algorithm. And you'll see it's really simple when you break it all down.
Okay, it sounds interesting. Let's start, and I will collect all the questions, and we'll ask you after you're done with the presentation. Let's go.
Цікавить стратегія лінкбілдингу під нові ринки. Беклінкерс – не просто будь-які лінки, а посилання, які вам насправді потрібні. Був негативний досвід лінкбілдингу та не хочете ризикувати повторно? Взагалі новий сайт і важливо побудувати максимально природну та безпечну стратегію, обмежені в ресурсах та часі? Є виділений бюджет, який потрібно ефективно спланувати? Всі ці проблеми вирішить Беклінкерс. Залишайте заявку прямо зараз. backlinkers.net/ua.
Brilliant. You can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Victor, and everybody else organizing this. Anya, I'm terribly ashamed now to have complained about my flat problems. Obviously, me moving to a new flat and getting a bit stuck with my sound and my lighting isn't a huge problem by comparison. Today I'm going to be talking about Google's three main knowledge algorithms, how they work, and what you can do to take advantage. I think for me this is huge. I've been working on Google's knowledge graph and knowledge panels for 10 years, 7 years really seriously trying to get it 100% right and ensure that Kalicube can fully serve our clients in terms of knowledge management in Google. Knowledge panels, the knowledge graph, and entity SEO in the wider sense. Now, at the bottom there, you can see the Kalicube support group. If you're interested in knowledge panels, knowledge algorithms, and brand SERPs, please do join the Kalicube support group. We geek out about knowledge panels all day long. Now, I'll introduce myself, and this is how I always introduce myself for presentations like this. It's through my brand SERP. Now, today, I thought I'd do it just through the knowledge panel. And as you can see here, everything in that yellow dotted line is my knowledge panel, 100% above the fold. I actually cheated a little bit to get the music group in there, and you can see my site on the left, but actually the fold is slightly above that, and everything above the fold is a knowledge panel. That means that Google is showing only things it is very sure are factually true about me. It's presenting me in its representation of how it thinks I could or should be represented. Now, that sounds scary. You think, oh, well, that means Google can say whatever it wants. In fact, Google wants to be truthful. And what I've done here is educated Google about who I am, what I do, and who my audience is. And as you can see at the top, I will start at the top. You've got overview, videos, books, music group, albums, education. Those are things that I've pushed into Google's brain so it understands that those are things I've done. I've been in a music group, I've written books, I've done lots of videos, I've made music albums. Oh, and I was educated. And it knows where I was educated, which is John Moore's Liverpool University. And in fact, if you look up alumni of Liverpool John Moore's University, I sit next to John Lennon, which doesn't make me a better musician, but it certainly makes me very happy. And I'll go through this really quickly because it actually describes very clearly who I am, what I do, who my audience is. And John Mueller, in fact, from Google, talks about me as Mr. Knowledge Panel, as the person outside Google who knows most about how to educate, let's say, Google to understand how it should be presenting us factually. Now, as you can see here, multiple places where it knows I'm a musician, music group, albums, and then the music group down the bottom, the Barking Dogs. It was a folk punk group in the 1990s. A songwriter. I've written over 100 songs, I think, maybe 90 songs. A cartoon blue dog in a TV series. I'm an author, written a book last year. In fact, the beginning of this year, it was released. And a digital marketer. And lastly, the brand SERP guy and the founder and CEO of Kalicube. So you can actually now already understand pretty much everything you need to about me just from looking at that above the fold knowledge panel. And that knowledge panel is driven by the knowledge algorithm. So how can you make that happen? How can you get Google to represent you that way, factually, 100% above the fold, in its own words, as it were, but as the person, the entity, the company, the podcast, the music group, the music album, even the product, you get to educate Google by working the right way with its knowledge algorithms. So if you start off by thinking Google's a child, it's a child who wants to understand the whole world, and it's very, very, very confused. The web is a huge mess. It's absolute chaos. We think as human beings that we organize things pretty well. On your own website, that might be true. It generally isn't true that individual websites are particularly well organized. When you take all the different websites built by all the different people with different perspectives, different ideas, different coding systems, it gets very confusing very quickly. And we tend to think, I believe, that the web is well organized because we look at it through Google and Bing search. And their role, their sole aim in life is to organize the web for us. So we get a false view of how clean and clear the internet is. So this is a child that's trying to use the internet to understand the world. It wants to understand everything about the world, and it's incredibly confused. It's thirsty for knowledge, and the trick to mastering the knowledge algorithms is really simple. It's to educate Google. This is the term I use all the time. It, number one, gives you control, gives you power, and it makes Google seem less scary. Google isn't this huge, frightening machine, although it is. It's actually a child who wants to learn, and all it needs is for you to teach it. And you teach it through its knowledge algorithms. Now, I've got a whole talk about teaching Google the specifics to build a knowledge panel, and you can find those online. There's a lot of resources on kalicube.com, kalicube.com. Lots of videos, lots of articles, lots of case studies. Go along and look at those. You can learn all about that. And this stuff in this presentation is totally new. It only exists in our courses, as we'll see at the end. And it's an approach, a high-level approach to educating Google using its knowledge algorithms, excuse me. Now, number one is the knowledge extraction algorithm. Number two is the knowledge vault algorithm. And number three is the knowledge panel algorithm. And it's really important to remember that none of them function in isolation. Now, for people who are in the SEO industry before, let's say, 2015, we tended to think very linearly about Google. It was the blue link algorithm, and we needed to rank number one in the blue links, and we tended to take that very much in isolation, and it was in isolation. Then you had universal search that came along, you had Darwinism in search. We then had to start thinking about the fact that these algorithms don't work in isolation. They all play off each other in the SERP and also these knowledge algorithms. So I've used the chess analogy. I played a lot of chess as a child. And it really is a strategic approach. And every time you move one piece, it will affect everything else on the board. So you can't think simply, if I do A, B will happen. Because it happened the first time, it will happen the same way. The second time, there are a couple of problems with that. Number one is strategically, when you move C, A to B doesn't make sense anymore or won't work in that way anymore. And the other, of course, is that Google is improving all the time. And we'll talk about machine learning a little bit later, and I will repeat this later on, but I think we also fail to realize how fast machine learning improves these algorithms. That machine learning is improving the algorithms at an exponential rate. If you talk to Fabrice Cannell from Bing, he gets incredibly overexcited about it. He's Mr. Bingbot, and he builds Bingbot. And he is saying now, Bingbot is 98% machine learning. And that machine learning is improving exponentially every single day. That's both scary, and it's also reassuring at the same time, in the sense that Google and Bing are getting better and better and better and better at what they're doing, which is trying to get the best content to the top to serve their users when they ask a question or express a problem for which they're looking to the solution. Google and Bing want to bring that solution, that answer, as efficiently as possible. Now, the other thing to remember is it isn't magic. I think the idea of the black box is lovely. You've got the black box with this magic in it. We don't know what's going on inside. Nobody knows what's going on inside. The engineers at Google and at Bing have created machine learning algorithms. The machine learning algorithms, by definition, are learning on their own. They're learning to learn in the case of the knowledge algorithms. So inside of these algorithms, what exactly will trigger A to B to C to D in terms of moving forwards in what you want to teach Google about yourself, who you are, what you do, and who your audience is? Nobody truly knows what makes the needle move each time. What we can do, however, and what we do at Kalicube, is analyze the data, use experience, and what I call smart intelligence, intelligent guessing, looking at this and saying, what makes sense? A lot of the time that will work. Experience, data, and educated guesses will get you a long way. Now, everything is machine learning. I love this illustration. We've got our friend, whose name I've totally forgotten, Albert Einstein. Thank you very much. Over there on the left. Machine learning is all about mathematics, data, which is the little green icon, and human intelligence, smart people saying, here's what we think the features are. Now, we call them factors in the SEO industry. What are the ranking factors? What are the knowledge factors? What are the algorithmic factors? In machine learning, they're actually called features. The human being will give the features, they will give the mathematical formula, they will provide the data, and they will tell the machine where they want it to go. What goal do they want it to achieve? And they will do that at the top there, you can see offline. Obviously, they don't train machines in the wild, they train machines offline. Then they push that machine learning algorithm when they think it's good enough into the wild in Google, which gathers loads and loads of data. I almost said a rude word. That brown barrel thing is supposed to be huge amounts of data from Google search. They then feed that into human judges. Bing call them judges, Google call them quality, what are they called? Quality raters, to assess whether the machine has achieved its goal. And that's crucial. They've told the machine, we want you to provide the best answer, the best solution, the most factual information to our users when they search on the search engine. The machine then tries to achieve that in the wild. The quality raters or the judges will then say to the machine, yes, this is right, no, this is wrong. So they provide it with corrective data or supportive data. And they feed that back to the engineers, to the machine, who work on it again offline. They tweak the algorithm, they feed the data back in, the machine learns where it's gone wrong, where it's been right. The engineers then reassess, rebuild the machine. They potentially add in a lot more data in knowledge. That's phenomenally important. We'll come to that later with data lakes. And once they've got that sorted out and they're pretty sure, we have an update and they push that back out into the wild. Now at Kalicube, in terms of knowledge algorithms, we track these. So we know when Google are updating them, when the engineers have taken that data, tweaked the mathematical formula, pushed the data into the algorithm and push that algorithm, the new version of the algorithm, out into the wild. And obviously that's an eternal cycle. It goes on and on and on and on. And Andrea Volpini from WordLift talks about machines dancing with humans. This is very much what's happening here. Machine learning isn't just running around trying to figure it all out on its own. That part in the wild, that part in the middle, is obviously massive, and it generates massive amounts of data that we cannot possibly track as human beings. However, the human beings do judge how good the machine has done, and our friend Albert Einstein and other engineers at Google will then reassess, rework, and tweak the algorithms and correct it when it's really not getting it right, and encourage it when it's getting it when it is getting it right. So from that perspective, we have a cycle with human beings pushing the machine to create the best experience for Google and Bing's users on a consistent basis in terms of serving their needs, answering their questions, fulfilling or answering their problems, solving their problems, excuse me, and importantly, providing factually reliable information. And that's where we focus at Kalicube. Now, how does Google gather the information? I think we now have become terribly used to the web index, which is a data river. I remember way back in the day with the Google dance. I've been doing SEO and working on Google since 1998. In fact, I started my first website and created my first SEO-friendly pages a couple of months after Google was first incorporated in 1998. And at that time, the Google dance was that you would update your website. Google would crawl the website a few weeks later, or you would submit it to Google at the time, in fact. It would then crawl the website and it would put the data in a lake, but that data would not go live in the index for several months. And you would then wait several months to see if the changes you had made had changed what you intended or not. And 3 months later, you would discover that it hadn't worked, and you would then start again, change it, wait another 3 months. And that was the Google dance. And that was because Google was using data lakes. It would add the data to a lake. It would not use it in the live index, and it would then go through the lake every 3 months, re-upload all of that data into the index with the new algorithm changes, and push that out. And recently, the last 7-8 years, maybe, we've come into a data river situation with the blue links, whereby the data is flowing constantly past the algorithm. And the algorithm is, I like to say, looking for the golden nuggets. It's like a gold panner. It's got its little gold panning basket. And as the data flows past, it picks out the golden nuggets. And those golden nuggets tend to come from authoritative sites that the algorithms trust. And it will miss a lot, which is why some things don't update and some things do update very, very quickly in the main algorithms. Then it pushes it all into a data lake, and that data lake is then used on the major updates when Google are doing these huge updates that they now announce more regularly than they used to. And those are the huge changes when a lot of data will be refreshed, and that data is refreshed with new algorithmic changes from the previous step we just looked at. Now, if you look at the knowledge graph, and in the knowledge, the knowledge graph, they're using a data lake. So we're still in the Google dance situation. Now, it isn't 3 months now. It's generally 2 weeks to a month, sometimes 3 months, depending on the time of, I was going to say the time of year, but it's actually the process of which they're updating all of this. And if you go on to kalicube.pro, which is one of our sites, which is our platform where we track this, we have 500 million lines in a database and several billion data points, tracking the knowledge algorithms, tracking the knowledge graph, tracking knowledge panels. You can see when these updates happen in terms of the knowledge graph itself. And that is incredibly important because when you're looking at knowledge in Google's mind, you have to remember that it's not updating in real time. It's updating over a period of time on data refreshes in the knowledge graph. That means that being impatient won't help you. You have to wait until it does update. And I'll give you a quick example is I track the Beatles. And what we see with the Beatles is that they're incredibly good for allowing us to see when changes happen because they're so famous and because news cycles around them tend to be very focused. Now, the last time we had a news cycle about one of the Beatles, it was actually all of the Beatles. It was 25th of June. It's Beatles Day, apparently, which I didn't know. And what we saw was a month later, there was a huge increase in the confidence score in all of the Beatles and the Beatles itself. So George Harrison, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr.
Хочете перевірити 100К доменів на параметри Ahrefs та Majestic за один раз? Не проблема. Підключайте аккаунт Ahrefs та використовуйте спеціальний Integrations Limit, який, до речі, не можна використати в самому Ahrefs. Ціна перевірки становить від 1 до 5 рядків за сайт і залежить від кількості обраних вами параметрів. Треба відсіяти сайти з непотрібним вам гео в пакетній перевірці або проконтролювати їх відсутність у проєкті? Легко. Link-checker по IP визначає великий відсоток таких сайтів, що особливо актуально, якщо вони не належать до національних доменних зон. Впевнені, що серед ваших сабмітів під США немає японських, іранських або навіть російських .com сайтів? Анкор-план виконується неякісно? Одруки, креатив веб-майстрів або просто криві руки виконавців? Додайте Анкор-план в проєкт і Link-checker покаже вам всі незаплановані анкори та урли. Контролюйте прогрес виконання Анкор-плану, коригуйте задачі та досягайте поставлених цілей. Будуйте якісні лінки разом з Link-checker Pro.
Which shows that they were using the data late. The data had changed, the news cycle changed in June, but the data didn't update in the knowledge graph until July. And when you look at the Beatles again, beginning of 2021, we saw a huge increase in the confidence score for John Lennon. What had happened is that the 40th anniversary of his death was in December 2020, and so the knowledge updated 2021 in January with a month's delay for that data-like scenario. So I hope that helps you understand how knowledge is accumulated by Google and that you need to be patient and you need to understand that this child learns slowly at the moment. But what we're seeing is it's learning increasingly fast. 7 years ago, it was very, very slow. Now it's slightly less slow. And in a few years, I would imagine it will be almost real time like the web index. So if we look at the knowledge extraction algorithm, it's Googlebot. It really isn't very complicated from that perspective. We're coming back to technical SEO is, can Googlebot access the content? Can it extract the content? Which is basic technical SEO, and I'm not going to teach anybody anything about that here today. But you need to think about what it's doing. When we started with passage-based indexing, Gary Yiddish said you can think about a page being stored in the index as mini folders. And that's crucial. What Google does is it looks at the page, it tries to identify the centerpiece content, and that is a huge problem that we underestimate. Where is the centerpiece content? We can help the algorithm by using semantic HTML5, by using schema markup, main content of page, to show it this is the main content, because it obviously doesn't want to waste resources time after time after time on asides or menus or footers. It wants to spend its time analyzing the core content, the centerpiece content that is what the page is all about. What it will then do is go and look at the H1, if it can find the H1, which isn't always easy if you don't have an H1 or you've got multiple H1s, or you're using H1s and headings for navigation, which happens more often than one would imagine. Identifies the H1 to figure out what the main page is about. Identifies the other headings to identify what the different sections of that page are about. Hopefully those different sections of the page are subtopics of the main topic. If you've done a great page, if it's not, the machine will immediately get confused. Then analyzes the entire text to understand, is the H1 actually honest about the content of the page? And as you can see, immediately you're getting into a problem where the machine is desperately trying to understand what's in the page, but also understand what information it can extract and to what level it can have confidence in that information. What it then does is it tags every element in the page. It adds an annotation. Now, this is once again Fabrice Cannell from Bing who explained to me. He is Mr. Bingbot, so we can definitely understand and believe what it is he's explaining. Annotation is absolutely huge. And for anybody who thinks, well, that's Bing, it's not Google, it doesn't matter, Gary Illyes then said a few years later, actually all the search engines work the same, which is what I've been pointing out since I'd interviewed the people at Bing. They all work the same. You can assume that if Bing is doing something, Google is doing something, and the differences aren't major. They have the same infrastructure, they have the same audience, they have the same aim. So from that perspective, with the same data, i.e. the web, the same technologies, machine learning, algorithms, the same aim to serve their users as best they can, these machines do not, these companies don't reinvent the wheel each and every time for themselves. So what the bot then does is try to annotate each piece of information on the page. So this is what it's about. This is an H1. This is what it's about. This is an H2. This is what it's about by looking at the paragraph underneath. And then add a confidence score. I am X% sure that this piece of text is about that topic and covers these entities. There, it can then add it to the index. From there, what you can immediately see is that that annotation becomes essential to absolutely every other algorithm in the system. If we go back to Bing again, the people who run, for example, the feature snippet algorithm, Ali Alves, and the guy who runs the video and image algorithm were very explicit. We rely on the annotation of Googlebot, Googlebot, to understand whether a piece of content is even worthy of being considered by our algorithm. Without that annotation, we cannot function. Without that annotation, we cannot even start to find the content. We just ignore it. So you have to make sure that that annotation by Googlebot, Bingbot is accurate and, importantly, confident, because the ones that it's most confident in will get right to the front of the queue. So that's for feature snippet algorithms, that's for the video algorithms, that's for the knowledge panel algorithm, and here we're talking about knowledge. So if you want to be considered by any of the algorithms further downstream, you have to make sure that Googlebot, Bingbot can annotate accurately your content, and you need to be sure that it can do so confidently. So if you've got a confidence score of 99% because you've correctly used your H1, you've put it in semantic HTML5 within a section and correctly marked your asides and your footer and your header and your menus, your navigation rather, then you've got a much better chance of getting that higher confidence score. If you haven't done that, your confidence score will be lower and you're likely to be further back in the queue. So in fact, we're looking at HTML5, also schema markup. I think a lot of us think schema markup in and of itself is going to be enough. It's incredibly important, but what does schema markup do? It repeats, for the most part, what's already in the page. It structures it and reassures the machine. So schema markup is actually all about confidence. Alongside HTML5, these are the machine's native language. So if you can provide schema markup and HTML5 that re-explain explicitly the role of each element in the page and the content of each element of the page, that's important. The centerpiece content, once again, you're going to be winning all the way because your confidence score is going to be higher than others. And that is where we're starting to feed the knowledge graph and the other knowledge algorithms. Because by being explicit, by being incredibly clean, by being incredibly consistent and clear, we're going to be providing Google and Bing with information in their native language, schema markup HTML5, that will help them to understand, once again, who we are, what we do, which audience we serve. Now, the Knowledge Vault algorithm. The Knowledge Vault is a machine-readable encyclopedia. Why am I talking about the Knowledge Vault and not the Knowledge Graph? Because there are multiple knowledge graphs in Google. And for that, you'll need to take the course, and I'll show you that at the end. But the Knowledge Vault is what most people call the knowledge graph. I'm now calling it the main knowledge graph or the Knowledge Vault. And it's the one that on Kalicube Pro, if you go there, you can see the query tool for the Google Knowledge Graph API. You can look inside and it will provide you with the entities that are in there with the confidence score, the description, and where it's got the description from, and importantly, the entity home. Another topic that I invite you to visit kellycube.com and learn about the entity home if you don't know anything about it, or search entity home in SEO. We rank #1. We coined the term so you can safely, I hope, assume that we will be ranking #1 for a good time to come. The entity home is phenomenally important. It's the foundation of everything to do with knowledge in Google's algorithms. So the knowledge vault algorithm, the knowledge extraction algorithm, your entity home has to be incredibly clear and incredibly consistent and incredibly well written, and have this HTML5 and the schema markup in place. And for the knowledge vault, if you want to get in there, the entity home is the hub of that information. So it's a machine readable encyclopedia that Google uses to understand the world. Now, I come back to that. It's a child who wants to understand the entire world. That's a huge task. Obviously, never will, but it's going to keep trying. So the key to this, in terms of getting into the knowledge vault or the main knowledge graph, is the infinite self-confirming loop of corroboration, a term that David Bain coined when I was talking to him on one of his shows. And the infinite loop, self-confirming loop of corroboration, there in the middle, you can see the entity home. That's my little colorful house. And you tell the machine the facts on the entity home. It's the place on the web where the entity lives. It's your canonical URL for the entity, if you like. You repeat that information on every reliable, authoritative, trustworthy source that Google is looking at, and you link from your entity home to that source, and from that source back to your entity home as much as possible. So Google goes round and round in circles, seeing the same information confirmed both on your entity home that you own, information from the entity by the entity, and every source around the web that talks about that entity. And that repetition for Google, the child, is always going to nail its understanding of who you are, what you do, and which audience you serve. So this child learns by repetition, it learns by consistency, and it learns from asking you, the entity, the person, the company, the podcast, the music group on your entity home first. Who are you, what do you do, and which audience do you serve? And then confirming that you're telling the truth around the web. Lastly, the knowledge panel algorithm. I think we should look at the knowledge panel as a SERP feature just like any other. It's more complicated than any other, but it's still just a SERP feature. And if you look at it this way, it's simply lots of mini featured snippets. And in the course that I teach, which we launched on Monday this week, I explain exactly how this is built. But the quick overview is, if you look at these as mini feature snippets, information that Google is confident is true, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the knowledge graph to be in the knowledge panel. It can add information to the knowledge panel simply by being incredibly confident, much in the way that it would for a featured snippet. So this list of songs, not all of them are in the knowledge graph. My partner is, the TV show is, my LinkedIn profile isn't, my website is, but you can see here that we've got some information that is being taken from the knowledge graph, and some of it is being created as dynamic mini feature snippets. And if you search around a name, Jason Barnard, who is, or Jason Barnard videos, if you click on one of those filter pills at the top, overview, videos, books, music group, albums, or education, you will see that the knowledge panel will change. And it will change obviously very quickly in real time, in 0.41 seconds when you reload the page, because Google is building the knowledge panel as a series of mini featured snippets. How it does that exactly is explained in the course. We also have a lot of content online, which is free on kellycube.com. You just need to read all the content on our site to figure out exactly how Google does this. So we're not keeping anything secret at KellyCube. We share all of this information with the idea that it's so important that people understand how to do this. It's really important that we learn to manage our presence in Google's mind in terms of knowledge as best we can. It's our responsibility as an entity to clean up our little corner of the world, to ensure that Google understands who we are, and ensure that information is factual and that it can use that to its best advantage, which is then going to be your best advantage when it gets it right, in terms of serving the subset of its users who are your audience. And I think that's really important to remember is when somebody's searching on Google, here it's my name, it obviously wants to serve my audience. My audience wants to know this information. I've told Google what information I feel it needs to know. For example, the songs or my partner or my TV shows or where I was educated, the organization I founded, Kalicube down there. If you look down bottom right, the book I've written, my music album, there are actually more than that. I'm going to try to add those in the next months. And the music group down at the bottom. So I've informed Google of all this information about me that my audience would want to know. And the best way Google can serve its users, who are my audience, is to provide that information to them. And if I would say so, under my instruction. Obviously, I don't control Google, but I've got an incredible amount of influence in terms of what it presents through my entity home. And the entity home is jasonbarnard.com, which is my own controlled website, where I present it with the information and encourage it, let's say, to provide my audience, the subset of its users who are my audience, with the information that I think is pertinent in terms of my books, my videos, my music group, my albums, my company, my education, my partner, and even when I was born. So, once again, oh, sorry, I'd forgotten about that. We've got these micro feature snippets at the bottom. It's now clear, and I should have remembered that I had this slide right afterwards to show that, in fact, each of those pieces of information is not necessarily in the knowledge graph. Liverpool John Moores University, for example, is in the knowledge graph, but the connection between myself and Liverpool John Moores University is not in the knowledge graph. My partner is in the knowledge graph, and that relationship is clearly in the knowledge graph. My book is not in the knowledge graph. It's in the books vertical, which is Google Books. And that is a whole topic of why the book isn't in the knowledge graph and yet triggers a knowledge panel and can yet also appear in my knowledge panel. And Google can make the link between myself and my book. And that's a whole story for another day because it would take me several hours to explain. Same thing with the music group, The Barking Dogs, and the album, although I am connected to The Barking Dogs in the knowledge graph, and that took me an awfully long time because the name The Barking Dogs, right at the bottom there in the right-hand corner, is very ambiguous. There are 4 different groups, music groups, called The Barking Dogs. There's a pub called The Barking Dog. Google struggles a great deal with ambiguity, and that is going to be one huge struggle for anybody. Unless you have a completely unique name as a company, Kalicube is unique, Jason Barnard is not unique, it's a huge struggle to get Google to understand the named entity, the specific entity, and present the information that relates to that specific entity. And the Barking Dogs is a great example because there were 4 groups and it got all 4 groups mixed up in one knowledge panel. And I had to patiently educate Google to separate the 4 different groups into 4 different knowledge panels, each with the correct albums, the correct musical style, and the correct members.
I'm an SEO expert, and I need quality backlinks to promote my website.
Buy authority links. Authority sites. Must be means.
Get outrage! Oh god, no. Greetings, stranger. I'm Shared Domains. Visit my website and get links from aged auction domains purchased through group buying. Many SEO professionals have already clubbed together and achieved great results with my backlink. How much do your links cost? Well, you can get a solid backlink for only $150 from a domain bought for $2,000 at an auction, and I'll take care of all the rest, including redeeming domains after hours, website building, link replacement, and other routine tasks. Okay, what about your domain zones? I have both international and European domains. Sign me up! How do I start? Simply visit shared.domains and create an account today to get an instant promo code.
Now, last point on this is that your website on Google, I look at these filter pills at the top and you look at that and it's simply a navigation. If you click on the videos, you'll see a list of videos. If you look on the books, you'll see my book and places you can buy it. If you click on music group, you'll see the different music groups I've played in. These are basically different SERPs. If you click on the videos, it will say Jason Barnard videos. The result will be my videos, but the result is not the same as if you type directly Jason Barnard videos. What Google has done here, as you can see at the top there, those filter pills look like a menu. This is a mini website on Google. This is currently the case for films, people, music groups, music albums, potentially, and songs. and sometimes books, but not for companies. But it will come to this for companies. Not only will you have those filter pills at the top, your mini website on Google where people can research you without even visiting your website, that you need to control. You need to manage this, because on-SERP SEO is going to be absolutely huge in terms of brand search, searching people's names, searching companies' names, searching product names. On-SERP SEO is something we cannot avoid, that we need to learn to manage starting today. So if you want to take this much further, we've got a free checklist. You can go to kalicube.com to download it, or join the Kalicube support group and ask on there where you can get it from. It's absolutely free. It's a 17-point checklist that is what we call now the Kalicube process. If you want to learn the Kalicube process, search what is the Kalicube process on Google. We'll come out on top. It's the 17-point process to manage your knowledge panel and manage Google's understanding of your entity, so it can present your entity, person, company, product, music album, music group, film, whatever it might be, that Google can present it as accurately as possible, as positively as possible, and as helpfully as possible to your audience, because they may no longer be visiting your website if you're in that circumstance. And if you want to learn a lot more, you can take the Knowledge Panel course. That's on Kalicube Academy. If you go to Kalicube Academy, you can find that. We released the soft launch on Monday. It's 5 hours of video, hundreds of secrets that I haven't shared with anybody before, some of which I've explained today, but 5 hours of the equivalent of what you've just listened to today in 36 minutes. 5 hours of that, there's a lot to learn. And honestly, I wrote the course, and as I was writing it, I went through everything I said, and I thought, do I know that, or do I just think that, or am I just guessing? And every time I thought, I'm not actually sure, I researched, I figured it out, I did a test. So it's taken me a few years to build that course, and now I'm so pleased with it. And honestly, I would pay myself to take my own course. And agencies, if you've got an agency, we've got Kalicube Pro SaaS, which is an automated system for doing that work of the infinite loop of self-corroboration. We use it for our clients. We have a done-for-you service that we offer to our clients. If you're an agency, you can do that. And it's incredibly effective for managing knowledge in Google's brain. Generally speaking, we can get Google to understand in 3 months, and we can get it to be incredibly confident in that understanding within a year. So a year-long project to get Google to understand who you are, what you do, and which audience you serve, and to present that perfectly 100% above the fold in a knowledge panel. Remember, a knowledge panel can be 100% above the fold. This is what the future looks like for people, for products, for books, for companies, whoever you might be. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It's interesting. How do you get that checklist? Like, do you have like a link, or you need to go to Kalicube and just trying to find it? Like,
if you go to kalicube.com, it's right at the top. There's a whole bar at the top, a blue bar. Just click on that and you can get that for free. If you join the Kalicube support group down at the bottom, search on Google Kalicube support group. We talk about knowledge panels and brand SERPs all day long. So if you come to the support group, somebody there will point you to the correct URL. But kalicube.com, kalicube.com, you'll be able to find the checklist.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I have some questions. First one, hi Jason, do you believe in Google quality algorithm? What are the main features of this one?
I'm not sure what you mean by the quality algorithm.
No,
Google's
like COATI.
COATI. Coty.
Yeah, Coty. Yeah.
Oh, right. I'm going to have to admit, I don't know what that is.
Again? Yeah, okay. We'll go. So, in your opinion, does Google have strict requirements for the website about trust and authority before Google displays many features snippet of the website? What do you think?
Yeah. The Whether or not Google will take information from a website and show it in a knowledge panel doesn't depend on the authority of the website in and of itself, nor does it depend on any of the traditional metrics that people use from Moz or Ahrefs or anything else, because you can be an authority and trusted for a specific entity. It's very, 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 very granular. So, for example, with the Barking Dogs, the group down there at the bottom, or Buwa and Koala, who are the albums just above, and the TV shows right there at the top on the screen, if you can still see that. Mm-hmm. My site is an absolute authority on that. I can feed Google pretty much anything I want, and it will show it in a knowledge panel. For the Barking Dogs, for Buwa and Koala, the TV show, because I'm an authority and I'm trusted on that, but I'm not trusted and an authority on a lot of other things, so I wouldn't pretend that my website is a trusted authority, generally speaking, but it's a trusted authority for those specific entities. And if you think about the entity home, which is the website you control, Google is looking to find information from the entity about the entity, explicitly looking for it. And your job is then to build up Google's trust in your authority, Google's confidence, in your trustworthiness and authoritativeness on that specific topic for that specific entity. So really, you've got to look at this granularly. And in Kalicube platform, we track that, and we've got a public list of trusted sources, which is a rolling 30-day one. So we've only got about 250 visible at any time. But we have 40,000 different domains that have provided descriptions in knowledge panels, and about 100,000 that have provided information in knowledge panels. And that's a huge number. And it isn't just Wikipedia, it isn't just LinkedIn, it isn't just Crunchbase. It's all sorts of very strange and unusual sites that you wouldn't imagine, because Google trusts them for the specific entity that it's representing with the knowledge panel.
Okay, thank you so much. What can be considered as spam in structured data, like schema markup? There is a recent Google amendment without clarification. Sorry.
Well, knowledge panel spam is something I think that's hugely problematic for Google. Knowledge panel spam, I actually recently wrote a short article on Kalicube about that. The idea, I think if you look at spam from the point of view, if you're creating content or doing something specifically for Google, to trick Google or to make Google do something that you want that isn't actually aimed at your audience at all, that's spam. So for schema markup, for example, an example of spam would be to put too much, to put immense amounts of spam. I've had a client who did that, who thought the more I put, the better. It's actually better to put less and more precise and more meaningful. So schema spam would be too much or lying, giving false information. Another example, which we found very interesting at Kalicube, is we have a little snippet of schema markup that we inject into the entity home. That's all we do schema for. People ask me about schema for all sorts of different things, but we now only focus on the entity home so that we're injecting exactly the schema that Google needs for any given entity type. And we have found that the more we put in, the less well it performs. And so we've reduced it down to exactly what we know Google is looking for and reassures Google. So it's not so much spam, but it's overload in terms of schema markup. It's really easy to go into overload, add much too much stuff, or get confused and confusing. So I'm confused because I'm not sure what I'm trying to express. I therefore become confusing when I'm putting the schema markup in place. Another huge problem Google has is multiple schema chunks on any given page. And we see that a lot when somebody's added Yoast and then WordLift on top, or Rank Math it's a great plugin, but people go a bit mad because you've got too much control, maybe. And so they add lots of different schema, and you end up with loads of different chunks of schema that don't make sense. One thing about schema is you need to think, what am I trying to express? What's the main purpose of this page? And the main purpose of this page cannot be 5 different entities. So the main purpose needs to be expressed from the schema in a very linear fashion. And if you look at it and you think that doesn't make sense to me as a human being, I don't know what to focus on, the machine's got the same problem.
Thank you. Next question is, how long does it take to see like the changes, like on average, like when you do all the like recommendation according to your checklist that you like usually, you know?
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's one of those terrible questions. I mean, it's a great question, but it's also a terrible, difficult question to answer. But in fact, I've triggered maybe 1,000 knowledge panels, so I've got a good idea of how long these things take. I would say you need to count on 3 months to start seeing some action, as it were. You need to look at a further 3 months for it to start to appear on the brand search, because of the difference between having a knowledge panel that exists in Google's brain and getting it to trigger when you search the name of the company or the person. So that's 3 plus 3. Then what Google will do is A/B test for another 6 months. So if you apply everything in our checklist for a year, you will end up with a stable knowledge panel with a decent amount of information in it. Not necessarily 100% above the fold. That's taken me years to build. But you will have a good knowledge panel that will tend to trigger, as long as it's not too ambiguous as a name. You can expect 3 months to get the knowledge panel to trigger, 3 months to get it to appear on the brand search regularly, and another 6 months for it to stabilize and become information rich. Having said that, there are times when an entity is at what I call tipping point, and sometimes you will add some information, Google will crawl it, it will go straight into the knowledge panel algorithm through the data river system, and it will trigger pretty much immediately. And sometimes you get a really pleasant surprise like that, and it's delightful. And that tends to be the moments when Google has almost understood, or has understood and is not quite confident enough. And typically those are the moments when you join just the right 2 dots. We had an example of a very famous actor who was struggling with his knowledge panel. We joined 2 dots using Rotten Tomatoes, and it all flowered and came beautiful and blossomed in 3 weeks. And it was one of those wonderful moments when everything comes together. And we had a client recently called Jason Hennessy, who's an SEO in the law sector, who's came to us because he said, well, I've got a problem. I don't understand why I'm not able to enrich my knowledge panel. And the answer is because he had 4 different knowledge panels. Google thought the same Jason Hennessy was 4 different people. So we merged all 4 knowledge panels together, and he has a knowledge panel which is pretty much as good as mine. And that was simply because Google thought it was 4 different people, and once it understood it was the same person, it just put it all into one knowledge panel using the knowledge panel algorithm, because the knowledge vault was okay, the knowledge extraction was okay, it's just the knowledge panel was confused.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, it's cool that you figured out for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's our specialist work. It's what we do all day, and I love it, and I love it when it all comes together and it works. And that's another thing, is we now say at Kalicube, it isn't a question of if we can do it, it's how long it takes us. Yeah. And how long did it take, like, for Hennessy to appear? Like, we were talking like three months and maybe 1 year. And like, if you are lucky, maybe like 3 weeks, but it's not for sure. But how long it exactly
took him to like, after you made Google understand that it's not 4 different people or just one person, like after you changed all this stuff?
It took a little over 2 months for us to merge the knowledge panels. And as soon as we merged them, it just flowered into this beautiful knowledge panel. Now it's very stable. So he was in the situation where Google had understood it was just fragmented. I mean, one sign of that we had was that one knowledge panel had one social profile, another knowledge panel had another social profile. So Google was just saying, I'm not sure that this is the same person. As soon as we explained that to Google, it was super happy.
Yeah, and it's cool. It says like SEO professional. It's not like that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, okay. And we're now in the process working with him to change that to become entrepreneur. So we can also change these kinds of things. Is say, what do you want to be known as? Do you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you want an SEO professional? Do you want to be an author in my case? Or do you want to be the CEO and founder of Kalicube, which is what I'm now working towards. We're currently doing an experiment of moving me from being Jason Barnard, author, to Jason Barnard, CEO and founder of Kalicube.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, so I have more questions. So it's another question from the chat. Hi, Jason. Thanks for great information. Where is the best way to update the knowledge panel info if there is shown another website with the same brand name in a different niche?
There isn't really a very simple answer to that. If you want to educate Google that these two entities are different and the niche that the other entity is in is indeed different, you need to focus on the specific niche-centric, authoritative, trustworthy sources. So what you would then do is work on ensuring that you explain very clearly on the authoritative, trusted sources in your niche, and that you use your entity home to point to them for Google, either using schema markup or a traditional link, which are just as good as schema markup in terms of indicating to Google where the information is. And one hugely important thing that people overlook is your entity description. Make sure your entity description is incredibly clear. And you can use Google's own NLP in Kalicube Pro, the platform. We actually have a tool that allows you to do that. And you will be able to see that you can pull up different entities depending on how you describe them. And I'll give the example of the barking dogs. I said there were 4 different groups. I wrote my description of the barking dogs and it got the wrong barking dogs. I then added members of the barking dogs include Jason Barnard, blah, 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 and then it got the right barking dogs immediately. So that's what I meant by my name and the barking dogs are related in the knowledge graph. And if you mention both entities in the same sentence, Google suddenly recognizes, oh, it's not that barking dogs, it's the other one that Jason Barnard was in. So that is hugely important and vastly underestimated. And once again, on kalicube.com, there's an article that explains how to write a great entity description.
Yeah, thank you for answer. And one more question. Does it depend only on the amount of brand organic traffic, or there are the factors that can help it outperform other websites with the same brand?
Oh, I like that question. That's a great question. Whoever asked that. Might have been you, Victor. No, it wasn't you. There is actually, it's a really interesting question because the volume of searches is hugely important, as that person has guessed, but geo region is super important too. If you take Mary Moore, in America, it's Mary Tyler Moore that will show up. If you look in the UK, it's Mary Moore, Henry Moore's daughter. If you look in Australia, it's a judge. So the geo region will change phenomenally what Google will show, because it's a question of probability. What's the probability that this person is searching for that entity? So search volume is important, but geo search volume, also geo-cultural interest, geo-press. The probability that somebody is looking for Henry Moore's daughter might also be affected by the news cycle around Henry Moore's daughter at this particular time in the UK that isn't repeated in Australia or in the US. And the third one is confidence. If you look at my knowledge panel, there are 300 Jason Barnards in the world. There's a footballer, there's a podcaster, there are digital marketers, there's a hockey player in Canada. And yet my knowledge panel appears like this around the world. Why? Not because I'm more famous, not because it's more probable, either through the news cycle or the search volume or click data on the, or not even click data, it's user behavior data from the SERP itself, which Google and Bing do use in terms of how they build the SERP. The reason that mine dominates is pure confidence. Google is so confident in the information it's got about me that it shows me just to show off. It's like a child saying, look, I know this and I know it's right. So confidence, once again, I mean, I said it right at the beginning when I was talking about Google's extraction algorithms, knowledge extraction algorithms, how confident it is in the annotation is something it tags onto that annotation, phenomenally important. Here, what it shows can depend immensely on confidence. If it is so confident that this is true, it will put it up there simply because it's sure it's true.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. A question from me, is it the same, like, for example, when you do for a persona, It's like you making like personal website, like you get articles like from the sources Google like, and like, but if it's a company, you know, like, and like, for example, when you type Apple, you want to see Apple and it's no knowledge graph on the right, but it's still some ads and other stuff. So how different like brand SERP for companies and like personas, like just
a company, generally speaking, you've just given the example of Apple, so that's the exception, of course, but generally speaking, company names will be less ambiguous because of, especially in geo regions, because of local trademark laws and company registration laws. And also, generally speaking, people will look for a slightly original name, give or take an exact match domain from 15 years ago that used to work incredibly well. And for people, you've got an incredible problem with ambiguity because so many people share names. So for a company, will run less into the problem of ambiguity. Not to say you won't, but you will tend less to have that problem. And for people, it's always a huge problem. And it's a huge problem that's going to get worse as Google understands more and more of the world. Right now, if we come back to me, I dominate Jason Barnard because of that confidence. As Google gets better understanding of the podcaster, the hockey player, and the footballer, I'm in trouble because there will be ambiguity and I will disappear in Canada and in South Africa.
Okay. And one more question. You mentioned like Jason, and he has this book, Law Firm SEO, right? And when you type this book name, before there were like other companies' guides, and now it's like on half of his screen book. Don't you think like people in most of the niches can like do trademark or on their terms or books and just do knowledge graph and just like take most of the traffic? This is like the main reason, or no? Like
then you're moving gradually into what would be knowledge panel spam, is creating an entity just to dominate a specific keyword that you want to dominate. And that's certainly possible. Certainly something Google's fighting against that they don't want to happen. With my book, The Fundamentals of Brand Search for Business, the book appears when you search brand search. It's the definitive work on that topic. So Google would want to show the definitive work on something. But yeah, there's huge opportunities for things to go horribly wrong for Google in that sense. And trademarking things is a good way to protect your space, but it's also a good way to actually make a term less popular and therefore less valuable.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for like good, useful presentation and for answering the questions. And
thank you,
like for your time sharing your experience. If you want to know more about Jason Barnard, just go to Google and type Jason Barnard and Telecube, jasonbarnard.com, and just like explore all his sources. Yeah. Thank you so much again. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Victor. Have fun, everybody. Bye-bye.